Jonny Bairstow intervened himself and carried off one of the protesters as they launched that orange powder on the field here at Lord's. We just had the first over of the second Ashes test with Australia batting England bowling, and it was the latest in what we've seen a series of similar protests at sporting events in recent weeks and months. We had orange powder thrown on the table at the World Snooker Championships in April, then on the pitch at the Rugby Premiership final at Twickenham last month, and now today on the first day of the second test. And there was swift intervention, as I say, with Jonny Bairstow himself intervening to block one of the protesters, but he had actually had time to unleash the orange powder on the pitch. At the same time, another protester was also dispersing the orange powder on the pitch as stewards intervened. And then there was a clear-up operation underway that was actually dealt with fairly quickly before play could resume. Obviously, the latest in a series of the climate protests by the Just Stop Oil campaign, and it has been a concern for various sports event organisers, but so difficult job for the stewards to actually be able to prevent them getting onto the pitch.
And in terms of play, has it now resumed?
Play has now resumed here. It was very swiftly dealt with by the ground staff here at Lord's, and play has been able to resume with Australia batting. Of course, they won the first test, so crucial moment for England in this Ashes series, trying to level the series.
I mean, I'm wondering, is there anger from sporting fans about this? I mean, obviously there's the disruption to their enjoyment of the game, but tickets for events like this are quite hard to get, aren't they? And presumably these protesters are people who've got into the stadium through legal and proper means, so they must have bought tickets.
Well, absolutely, potentially so. Denying tickets, of course, to those who want to enjoy the cricket. Someone who's actually in the long room here at Lord's tweeting there are actually cheers as the protesters were apprehended, and then they were able to actually swiftly resume the play. I mean, we have heard, obviously, other sporting events where there have been protests, like at the horse racing, about the dangers it poses. Here, obviously, less so with the more genteel surroundings, but certainly those who've come for their day of cricket, seeing the disruption, and obviously they'll be discussing here, you'd imagine, to ensure there aren't repeated protests too. But certainly, the scenes are something we have actually been anticipating across the sporting summer, particularly from Just Stop Oil protesters. We've had animal welfare activists as well at horse racing, but certainly it has been something that they have been trying to keep a watch on. We heard yesterday from the organisers of the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, which will be next month, in terms of warning protesters there against trying to intervene on the motor racing circuit, where there'd be far greater dangers. But this, the latest in a series of protests, which, of course, the climate protesters say is necessary to put pressure on the government themselves.
And Rob, you know, in terms of the actual sport itself, we saw with the snooker, for example. I mean, that was on the actual table, wasn't it? You know, so that really did disrupt the sport. But by and large, are we finding that sport generally is being quite nimble at dealing with this now?
Well, obviously, the visibility of sport provides a platform for the protesters to target the events. It's a way of getting their message across. We end up discussing it on here. And for some, they target sports for their potential damage to climate change. The World Snooker Championships did have a car sponsor, company sponsoring them, so that would obviously provide a potential outlet for the cause for protest. But certainly they have been addressing those that do damage the environment, those sporting events that do so. But certainly for sporting events, it is something now factored into their planning in terms of how do they try to deter the protesters, what sort of level of dialogue. And last week at Royal Ascot, there were no protests. There had been potential in the build-up to that, given the fact the Epsom Derby a few weeks earlier was disrupted by animal rights activists. But it certainly has been a theme of the sporting summer here, the fact that the platform of sport is being used to raise awareness of causes, but also causing that disruption.
OK, Rob. Thanks very much, Rob, there, just giving us the latest on the disruption at the Ashes by Just Stop All protesters. Play, though, has resumed there at Lord's in London.